It would not be an episode of the Clown Fiesta podcast if we are not talking about drama surrounding TSM. And so we're going to do just that. Another TSM coach gets let go, another staff member, however you want to word it. And then we also get to talk about TSM if they possibly have a playoff run. Is it possible they make playoffs? And then we got to get to 100 Thieves, who's on a 5-game win streak, and Immortals on a 7-game lose streak. We got some pretty big streaks. We will get into all of that this episode. Blue Jay, J&T 250, episode 78 of the Clown Fiesta podcast starts right now. J&T, let's start off with Peter Zhang being let go for what this is some pretty crazy ass shit. Let's give the lowdown.
Yeah, it feels like it kind of came out of left field. I mean, I think people kind of expected something was coming when Spica put out that first tweet where he's like, every day at TSM is a banger.
We were in Discord when that came out,
Yeah.
and we said, I can't wait to find out what this is about. And it did not disappoint.
Yeah. And about 4 hours later, TSM themselves announced that they were letting go of their head coach, Peter Zhang. And I'll use their words here in their exact tweet.
Academy head coach, just to be clear.
Yeah, he's part of the LCS team, though.
Yeah.
But I'll use their words here in the tweet that they put out. Due to conflict of interest and unethical practices.
Mm-hmm.
So for the people who don't know, there was an article on Dextero that got put out. I don't know if it was the day after or like even a few hours later. I don't remember exactly. But it basically just outlined a couple different situations where, these conflict of interest and unethical practices were described. The first thing that I feel like a lot of people were talking about, especially on, Doublelift stream and whatnot, and that was kind of reiterated, through other former people who had interacted with Peter Zhang, within the LCS, whether it was on TSM, whether it was on Team Liquid. But, the big thing that everyone was sort of talking about was him sort of asking to borrow large sums of money from both like coaches, players, whatever. And there was this whole situation with like Sword Art's car, and, we could go on and on about it, but like the point of this is it's like every single time, like you said it right away, like we have to go, like we can't go a week without talking about TSM and some dumb shit that somebody on their org is doing.
And the thing is, like, even like Lena and Doublelift are no longer part of TSM. They're gone. But in on Doublelift's stream, Lena came out and said, like, guys, I know it's so easy to jump on TSM with all the drama that they have recently, but even she was like, guys, I don't think this is TSM's fault. Like, as soon as they found out, they got rid of them and blah blah blah. But it is funny when you have Lena and Peter, I guess we'll say Doublelift, defending TSM. That was a little strange. I guess it was more Lena than Doublelift, I guess, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah, Doublelift was kind of memeing the whole situation. I think rightfully so.
I wouldn't expect any different out of Doublelift, though. I wouldn't expect, like, as soon as I saw there was a video up, I was like, yes, this is what I want to watch right now, is to see Doublelift's reaction to all of this. And the other thing that I'll say, too, is, like, there was a lot of speculation that it was betting and stuff like that, and the LCS commissioner pretty much came out immediately and said, yeah, just so you guys know, this is something internal with only TSM, and it's not betting. So, to make that clear.
So I mean, that's kind of interesting, though, because, initially that was the sort of rumor that, there was a rumor going around that, like, coaches were somehow betting on LCS. Well, not somehow, because they can, but that coaches were betting on LCS matches. And even with the LCS commissioner coming out and saying, hey, that does not pertain to this particular solution, like, then where did this rumor come from? Like, rumors don't just get, like, thrown up in, not necessarily, like, they have some basis for it. And, I don't see there being much of a connection between betting on LCS matches and like asking to borrow money. Like sometimes, rumors can be sparked from, like a broken telephone and like, things not sort of getting around, like, and, being lost in communication. But I feel like what we were actually told doesn't really align at all with like betting on LCS matches. So you just gotta wonder a little bit if there's any truth to that small rumor. But that's besides the point here. I mean, to talk a little bit more about the Peter Zhang situation, if you did watch that Doublelift video or heard any of the various things he said on stream, like, basically, he kind of just came out and said that, like, Peter Zhang was, like, this really weird and untrustworthy guy who told a lot of lies when, he was, during his time on TSM. The one funny story that, like, I remember, like, listening to from that video was that when TSM was boot camping at Worlds in Season 10, when it was in China, that like Peter Zhang claimed that he knew the hotel manager of the 5-star hotel that they were staying at, But then it turned out that he was sleeping on the floor of one of the FlyQuest substitute players, and like I guess didn't know the hotel manager or something. Or I mean, at the very least, if he did know him, he was still sleeping on his floor. It's just like really funny. Like I understand, like sure, the real situations that Peter Zhang has sort of, what he's sort of claimed is that these various bills were for like his grandmother's like medical surgery. And I mean, if that is the case, like you got to feel bad for the guy at some point, and you got to understand that he was probably in a difficult financial situation. But if that's not the case, like that's just so crazy.
Yeah, so if that is the case, obviously heart goes out to him. However, that does not excuse asking what it sounds like he's asking a bunch of TSM members or former TSM members for money. It does not excuse being a like part-time agent slash part-time coach, which he says is not true. I believe in his interview from the Dexerto thing, he says that I don't remember his exact wording, but he basically says that he was not acting as a player agent at any time or whatever.
Yeah,
But he can see why it was perceived that way. We'll have to wait till the investigation comes out before we have like a hard opinion on that. But from the sounds of people talking that knew him, it sounds like he's kind of a bit of a doofus, not so much of an asshole, but more of an idiot by the sounds of things.
In that specific instance of him acting as a player agent, quote unquote, he said that he was only acting as a third party for giving, for like acting as sort of a middleman for the payments from the TSM LCS / Academy players for the payments for their actual agents who were presumably Chinese. Because once again, like this is what Peter Zhang said in this article when he was being interviewed, that he had both US and Chinese bank accounts, so it made a lot of sense for TSM players to send a portion of their monthly salary to their agents through him. And again, obviously we don't know if that is the case, if he actually did end up sending the money. From his end, he said he did, and obviously an investigation will lead to if he actually did or not. But it's like, it's just funny to just laugh at this point, because like there's so much shit that has just gone down with TSM this season, with like their coaching staff early on, with them basically losing like all of their notable staff and personalities over the last like year and a half, and now them being last place in LCS.
Yeah, the situation itself isn't funny, but the fact that it's TSM is what makes that funny. It's like, holy shit, they are setting records for like controversy, and of course it's got to be TSM. And with so many people, I mean, who was the other coach? There was a coach that was let go during the original Shenyi fiasco a couple months ago now. Do you remember who it was?
We never got his name. They never said what his name was.
Yeah, I don't. Okay. Anyways, I wouldn't even remember. Anyways, but then obviously we mentioned, as everyone knows, there was like, well, you had Bjergsen and you had Doublelift and all those guys left, and Lena left, and then there's the Reggie controversy. Like, holy crap. It is actually so amazing. So at this point, JNT, I think it's only natural for us to take a swing at who's going to be next. So I guess let me ask you, who's next off the I'm quitting or I'm getting fired chopping block?
It can be anybody. Doesn't matter who.
You don't want to take a swing?
No, but I'm asking, like, can it be anybody, or does it have to be like...
Why not?
It's going to be fucking Kaiduo. They're going to ship his ass back to the LDL.
I wonder... I'm going to go with Chowie. Reasoning being, not that I have anything against Chowie. It's not that I think he's a terrible coach or any of that crap. But the reason being is that, was one of the reasons why he was the coach, wasn't it because of his ties to China, being able to speak the language? It seems to me like they're probably going to try to get rid of some of these players, some of the Chinese players like Kaiduo, maybe Shenyi. We don't really know because they haven't been completely transparent with us about the Shenyi stuff. They came out with an original reason and then later on said, actually, that wasn't the real reason. Here's what it is. And then now I kind of have trust issues with TSM.
Hey, hold on. There's one quick thing about this. They literally just today released a video. I don't remember if it was on their Twitter or their YouTube or something, but it was basically, it was their manager, who also is like Chinese and speaks Mandarin. And it was like a 1-minute video saying that there was a bunch of misinterpretations of Chowie's interview that came with, the Shenyi benching. And to me, like, TSM looked like even more clowns, because they basically went on this video and corrected themselves, saying, no, Shenyi, like, he wasn't demotivated. He's actually the most motivated and hardest working player on the team. And to me, that's just kind of hilarious if you were to then bench your, like, in quote unquote, in their own words, highest motivated and hardest
Yeah.
working player. Like that just seems hilarious when your team is struggling 0-4. Like, and then you get, once again, you'll chalk it up to communication issues and, this whole developing versus developmental roster. Like, it's just a huge meme. Like, I can't help but laugh at anything TSM related now.
I did see that, and I forgot all about it. So I'm glad you bring that up. But when I look at that, I thought maybe Shenyi was probably getting some heat because he said that there was some negativity or something like that. So it was like, oh my god, we don't want Shenyi getting flamed from the fans. Let's come out and make a statement that makes him look a little bit better. And again, like the point that I was getting to is like I can't really trust TSM for anything anymore when it comes to like these announcements. So I guess what I'm saying is we don't know if all of the controversy has come out. And when you're the guy in charge, the coach of a highly controversial team with a lot of like possible bad blood between players, and you're like towards the bottom of the standings, like that is a good reason to be let go. And so there's a lot of reasons why I would point to Chowie next, but I mean, like you said, it could be anyone. It
Yeah.
literally could. And I think that we are far beyond the point that it's like, all right, let's just start taking some guesses at who's next, because it just seems like this TSM drama filled year, which we're only like 3 months in, by the way, is just not going to end.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I see it is TSM themselves, like internally, probably still consider them to be a top team in the LCS, regardless of the performance in this split, just due to the individual players they have, the money that they can shell out for both players and coaching staff. So if I were to make an early prediction, I would say they're going to blow the whole thing up and just try to buy whoever is available for summer split.
Yeah.
Like if I was TSM and like I was actually trying to put together a good roster, I would probably get rid of everybody on the team except for like Spica and Huni. I mean, I would probably get rid of like whatever, variation of mid and support they have right now, like whether it's Takeover Kaido or Yurson Shenyi, and then Tactical. Like I just don't think Tactical is as good as like Spica or Huni individually, since not being on Team Liquid anymore. And I would probably try to go after your top remaining NA native players. Plus, this will also free up again 2 import slots, so you can go after maybe like LEC players, top ERL players, if they want to maybe go the Korea route, or even if they want to go Chinese players again, but instead just like buy LPL players instead of LDL players. Like I don't know, I just don't see this this ending with TSM going into the next split with the same roster. It's just not going to happen.
I don't think so either. And so that's even another reason as to why it's a good time to start taking some guesses, because we expect changes, and I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Who they're going to be able to get is not obvious, because as we mentioned in past episodes, the idea of Jensen's been thrown around. Well, maybe Jensen doesn't want to go to TSM, right? Who knows? Or Ignar, and so on. The list goes on. We don't need to go over the same conversation that we've had before, but the point is we expect changes, and so the next person on the chopping block could be anyone, as you were saying. Before we move on, I do want to let people know that for the new viewers, people that don't get to listen to our episodes very often, we are available on all Anchor-supported podcast platforms. So that means Spotify, Apple Podcasts, there's a bunch of others. And if you want to catch this show live and join the conversation, we're live every Monday night at just before 12:30 EST, so just past midnight, or 9:30 PST. We go live sometime around then, maybe a little bit earlier. And you can find us at twitch.tv/clownfiesta podcast. Now, let's get into TSM, what we saw this week. I think the best place to start would be the TSM Immortals game. So let's pull them up and let's discuss what was an absolute disaster of a game, J&T,
Yeah.
but didn't end in disaster for TSM.
TSM Immortals is becoming my like newest like favorite shitter rivalry. Like when I think of like shitter rivalries, like I guess previous ones I would think of are like, I'm trying to think of like OG LCS ones, but nothing's coming off the top of my head. But like back when FlyQuest was bad and they were playing CLG, or when Golden Guardians played CLG like last year, because they were like they were 9th, 10th place teams. Like they were both horrible. Like TSM versus Immortals is like my new like. I love to watch this matchup purely because of how bad the teams are.
There's definitely people listening to this right now thinking about Dig Renegades because of that game. That was probably the biggest. That was the biggest clown fiesta, pun intended, that we had maybe ever seen. That game was that game sticks in people's minds. So that's a good reference if you want to go back a little bit further. But yeah, anyways, the game was fun to watch, not because it was good, but because it was just an absolute, like, even the casters are like, okay, we've all been in this game before where just everything's going wrong, and they're talking about how you FF at 15 and blah blah blah, and it gets turned around. Like, we did not think that Immortals was a good team, right? We knew that they weren't great, but God, I didn't think they would be this bad. My God,
Yeah,
holy
like
crap, man!
dude, Immortals
What?
was the team that we were talking about was going to be like that sixth place team. Like there was presumably before the year started, there was going to be your conditional top five of C9, TL, 100T, TSM, EG, and I think the majority of people probably picked Immortals to be in that sixth, seventh range because of they're keeping some of their solid pieces from the previous year, and well, presumably solid pieces. What everyone else would say, I wouldn't say. Revenge and Xerxes. Xerxes is actually pretty good. But then they added, they got back Wild Turtle, they added Power of Evil, and they still had Destiny around, who I thought was all right. But this team is just like, it's turned into a complete disaster.
Well, and a couple of things. So they have that terrible start in lock-in, and then everyone. So first, what happened was the thing that you said, where everyone was like, "This could be a team that pushes into the top five. Who knows, right?" And then they had the terrible lock-in, and everyone was like, "Oh, is this the worst team?" And like, they might be the worst team. And then they started off the season 4-4, and we're like, "Oh, okay, maybe this team is that decent team that could take wins off of good teams." And then now they're on a 7-game loss streak. So like, holy crap, have things gone for the worst? And the other thing I'll say too is like, okay, Revenge is bad. We did never did we think Revenge was a great player. There's no way we thought he was this bad, man. Do you remember last year there was like a good performance every once in a while? This is like on the regular. Every week we're seeing ganks top lane, we're seeing top lane dives. They are giving him advantages or helping him get advantages, and those advantages are just gone. It doesn't matter. As much as you play through Revenge, it does not matter. The lead will go away, and that's what we keep seeing over and over and over again.
And that's like the biggest problem that I even mentioned last week with Immortals is they'll consistently send resources to the top lane for revenge, and he'll consistently either lose that lead or do nothing with that lead at the expense of their bot lane. Like obviously the Immortals bot lane is bad, but do I think that it's like solely their fault and I think that they're horrible individual players that can't match up to the rest of the league? No. It's just that they get zero help and get put on an island while the majority of Immortals' attention goes toward the top side of the map, and it usually results in almost nothing. And I mean, this game wasn't exactly like that because, Power of Evil had that fantastic start where he was like 5-1 on the Cassiopeia.
Mhm.
I mean, the broadcast, and I mean, I didn't really check social media after, was kind of like flaming him for going this more like tank build Cassio rather than, being the damage carry that he should be. I personally didn't have a problem with it, but you kind of saw like continually throughout that game, Immortals still decided to play a very topside focused approach with Revenge getting counterpicked by Huni's Aurelia and Huni just still stomping him.
Well,
Like
so
Immortals took some really terrible fights in the top side, like 2v4, 2v3, opted into these fights while ahead, and just completely threw away their like massive 2,000 goldie that they got in the early game for basically free, with like running TSM down after like a failed invade and like ran them down with like Ash slows, and it's just sad watching Immortals play, honestly.
So I think you make a really good point about the bot lane because we are very critical of their bot lane, but you're right in saying like they don't really get any resources. Like it's never like they're playing through bot lane.
I
So
don't
I
think
think
I've
that
seen
that's
Immortals gank bot a single game.
and that's something that needs to be said, right? Because I think you're 100% right about that. However, with this game against TSM, the leads were definitely mid. The Casio, like you said, he was like 5-0 or 6-0, or I don't even
It's
remember, but
five
he
and
was
one.
really,
Like
really fed really early. And the other thing about the stone play, I saw more good on social media after, so we might have just seen different
no,
varying.
I was
There
just
were
saying
some
I didn't
varying
see.
opinions.
Like I didn't
Oh,
like
okay.
look and didn't see. I just remember Azale flaming it on the broadcast. That's all.
Oh, really? I thought that he said he didn't. Anyways, I don't remember. But anyway, when you get something like this, there's usually some varying opinions. For me, I saw more good than bad. But it didn't excuse, like, the build was not the reason why they lost. The reason why they lost is, you first of all, Power of Evil invades and gives the red buff over to Revenge, which should be really helpful in that lane. Like I know that Aurelia could be great into the Graves. I understand that, but once you have the red buff, I think that allows you to trade way more aggressively, knowing that you can regen all that, and not only that, do you also have the burn and the slow that you get with red buff. So uh, I don't think that Huni should have smashed that lane that hard, considering that you get a really early red buff. Does that mean you just win the lane? No, but I think it definitely helps. The other thing is, Power of Evil in team fights was quite bad. Like, the thing that I point to right away is the Zonias, and you just allow Huni to pop off on Aurelia. All of their damage was put into Cassio with having all those kills, and I don't know if he fat fingered his Zonias or he just thought he was going to die, but he Zonias at full health in that team fight that
Yeah.
pretty much pushes the game into TSM's favor. That to me was the biggest hiccup for Power of Evil in that particular game
It was at the dragon
amongst a
fight you're
couple
talking
others.
about, right? Where you got J4 ulted?
Yes, like he does not need to Zonias at full health. Like that just allowed TSM to go batshit crazy. You got Tactical and Huni just going wild because they're like, okay, well the Casio can't hit me for 2.5 seconds. That's a long time for an Aurelia and what was it, Jinx? Was it Jinx in that game that he was
Yep.
playing? To just go nuts. So that was a big problem. Amongst some others.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I just remember watching the game, like I was basically like screaming at, Immortals is like they didn't build any heal cutting. Like they have this triple lifesteal rush Irelia on the opposing side, and they built no like lifesteal. Like there was multiple team fights where Huni would like dive in, drop down to 1 HP, and then regen to like either full or half HP with the survivability with the shield bow, and then he would get Death Stance plus Triumph procs, and they would just end up stopping the fight. Like there were a few instances, and even some of those late game team fights where if Huni dives in and dies, like he dies first, like Immortals will easily win the fight because Huni is like the entirety of TSM's comp at that point into the game. And I don't know, they just refused to build heal cutting. Revenge literally bought an Executioner's Calling as he died, as the Nexus was exploding. And
to
like,
try to avoid the flame, you think?
I don't
oh
do
shit,
that.
I better buy this before the game ends so people think I built some heal reduction.
I wonder if it was just one of those situations where like you just assumed somebody else had bought it. It was like, oh well, of course Cassia is going to get Oblivion Orb because like she hits everybody else, or of course Ashe is going to get it because like Ashe volley hits everybody in the team fights, and like it kind of like nobody had it. Like I'm pretty sure if Immortals built heal cutting that game at any point, well, I guess in the early game, they probably would have won that game, and that's like no meme.
Yeah, no, you make a very good point there. And I don't think that there's any excuse to just assume someone built it. Whenever there's that much healing in the game, you should first think, should I build this item? And then when you have that thought, you've been in games before, J&T, when you have that thought, one of the first things you do is you look at your teammates and see what they've built. And you see, oh, we don't have any of that yet. I'm definitely building that. Or, oh, we already have a shit ton of that. Maybe I can build something else. Like that is like League of Legends 101, man. Pros should definitely be looking at what their team's building when it comes to heal reduction and when there's that much healing on the enemy team. So if the reason is, oh, I just didn't look, that's pretty noob, honestly. Like that's bad. You should be able to look and see if you need heal reduction. Um, so there's that. The other thing is that, and this is like I have a hard time with this one because they didn't show bot lane very often. But before the game was even like thrown, um, they are just hard losing bot lane. And they didn't pan to bot very often, probably because your point earlier, they don't really go, there's not really a lot of plays that happen around bot. But somehow Immortals bot lane is just getting absolutely smashed by TSM's bot lane. And I couldn't figure out how because we didn't really see it. But I'm like, how the fuck? How does how does Tactical have like 60 more CS than Arrow at like, I don't even remember if it was like 15 minutes or 20 minutes. It was relatively early. And that made no sense. And like, there was no like throw for them to fall behind like that. It's just they just got hard stomped in lane, and that probably shouldn't happen.
It was also pretty weird that like Immortals chose to early pick the Ashe like they did. Like I'm pretty sure they picked it on like B2.
Kai'Sa was open and they had Nautilus. I remember thinking, oh, I see. They locked in the Nautilus. They're probably going to see Kai'Sa Nautilus. And I'm
Did
like,
they first
oh,
pick
Ashe.
Nautilus? Or did they?
I think so.
I just remember I'm pretty sure they picked Ashe on like B2 and like TSM. I don't think TSM had picked Jinx at that point either. Like they first picked their AD carry.
Give me 2 seconds, I'll find it for you.
Yeah. I mean, for me in this game, like as much as Huni was like kind of carrying the game in his team fights, I thought like Shenny also had a really good game on the Alistar. Like the Alistar for him seems like a pretty good pick. Especially I think Alistar is a good pick when you need that like insta go button that is much easier to set up than like a Rel Flash WR or than like what am I trying to think of, like other like Leona Engage, because like Leona Engage is easily flashable, whereas Alistar is like usually that very reliable, I'm gonna flash headbutt pulve somebody, or I'm gonna flash like headbutt or flash pulverize into 4 people. Alistar feels like a really like solid support, especially for Shenyi. If there is any worry that TSM, their team fighting is not as good or their communication issues like might still be apparent, I think that Alistar is like a more reliable and easier to play support than others, especially if you can kind of be more measured with it. Because I mean, you can just be playing games on Alistar and just be comboing in and like insta killing yourself if you're not doing it at the correct time. But I thought Shenyi had a really good weekend. I know Tactical got Player of the Week. I thought he was good. I mean, he was solid in the C9 game. Um, but I thought Shenyi. If I had to pick Player of the Week, I mean, it was probably either Speaker or Shenyi
So
for me at least.
just a quick note, just on the draft, because they first picked Viego, TSM went Rise and Jinx, and then Immortals
Oh,
did Nautilus Ashe on 2-3
okay.
on
So they
Blue
picked the Ashe
2-3. So
into the Jinx. I mean, I thought the Ashe pick was still weird. Like, who the hell is playing Ashe?
it is a little weird, but anyways, I do want to talk more about TSM because even though we have to definitely flame Immortals for this awful game, there was some pretty impressive shit to come out of the side from TSM. Um, I mean, we said how bad the Ashe looked in this game. However, level 1, he hard chunks out Takeover. What the hell champion was he playing? The Rise.
Rise.
Yeah, and honestly, he's still CSing 10 per minute. Like, that should be an absolute nightmare of a lane, considering especially that the Cassio got hella fed early. Rise did not fall behind at all in this game, which was kind of insane. So you got to give credit there. Even Spica, who's obviously put really far behind in his game, is finding ways to get fights. Even we saw the E flash, the EQ flash on Jarvan, which was a really nice play. That's what kind of started swinging the game. And then obviously Huni was an absolute beast. So even though the game started off pure disaster and it was just like, looks like this game is far over, you have to give TSM credit for finding ways back in this game, even if it is mostly Immortal's fault for making all these dumb mistakes. TSM still played about as good as they could for being in such a big hole, which is pretty much a good sign for TSM, considering considering they're in a playoff hunt.
I mean, yeah,
Memeing
they can still
fully.
make it. There's one possibility basically where they make it.
Yeah, we put that in the title, saying, "Is it possible TSM can make a run?" And for those of you that didn't see JNT's Reddit post, maybe we'll put that in the description.
We will.
If
I did
if
my homework.
okay,
Just
yeah,
gonna. It's fifth on the league subreddit right now.
JNT put a lot of time into this, guys.
It
So
was like an hour and a
go.
half. It wasn't that long.
Well, that's a lot of time. Anyway,
My Reddit karma is going through the roof.
wow, congratulations on your recent success. Anyways, basically the idea is like, yes, they can make playoffs. It is a very, very long shot. I don't even know, did we figure out what the percentage was? I bet you they'll announce it on
Oh,
the analyst desk this weekend. They'll probably come up with a percentage this weekend, I bet. Or
I
someone
mean,
might. Maybe in the comments, maybe someone will. But the point is they can
it's
make
got
it.
it's got to be like less than 1%.
Yeah, the point is they can make it though. They have to go 3-0 and then they have to win some tiebreakers, correct? Is the
Yeah,
TLDR?
pretty much. I mean, they have to go 3-0 no matter what, but like they need a lot of other help. Like other teams have to go 0-3. Specific teams have to lose specific matches. It's a long shot. They can still make it. It's still possible. I will plug my Reddit post in the description because it kind of does at least a decent job of describing it. Because I didn't even know myself. Like, is TSM like, can they still even make it? And I just like went too far down the rabbit hole. But I
Took a
mean,
deep dive, huh?
we can talk about their C9 game as well
Mm-hmm.
because their game against C9 was actually like pretty impressive. Like, this was like I've literally been saying almost the entire season that like Spica doesn't do anything in the early game, and like this game he was actually doing a lot in the early game, and I thought TSM's early game was probably their biggest strength in this game. Although they do think that Cloud9 themselves, like they were obviously like playing super disrespectful, and like there was like I think 4 kills in a row was just like C9 members getting caught out in a side lane, whether it was Fudge or whether it was Summit. I think Summit got caught in a side lane 3 times within the span of like 10 minutes, which basically
Really?
erased all of like Cloud9's early game pressure and just kind of gave like TSM's like huge mid game spiking comp like a massive advantage. Like, dude, like they're like listen to these mid game champions like Rumble, Lee Sin, Zeri, and Set. Like those are just some disgusting champions from like level 6 to like level 13. Obviously, like Cloud9 had some pretty massive scaling in like the Veigar Kaisa, but TSM was just too far ahead at that point with Ocean Soul for Cloud9 to really like scale and do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was another game where TSM actually played pretty good, which we haven't seen a lot of this year. I am going to point to Takeover again because in this particular game, he was getting prio all the time, which it was against Fudge's Veigar. Like I think the Rise should get prio there, but he was definitely able to have a lot of influence on the map. First, he roams top. I believe it was with Spica, and they get the teleport from Veigar to top lane. They pull off the they decide to not pull off. How do I say? They
Pull
decide to not
out,
do the dive.
pull out.
They decide. Yeah, you get that's what I'm trying to say. They decide to not go for the dive, and they go back to farm again. He gets Prio again, and now he says, "Well, we can roam top," and Vagar can't answer with the teleport this time, and they end up getting the dive on Summit that way. And I was like, "Hey, like this is some really good proactive play." You mentioned Spica making shit happen. I think that was in duo with the mid. Like this is a classic mid jungle style roam, which is what you're supposed to see out of LCS teams or any pro teams for that matter. And I just think they executed on that really, really well. And I mean, what the hell? You got the last place team that beat the first place team because they actually played well. Yes, C9 made some mistakes in this game, but my God, did TSM look way better than we've seen them in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far to say like TSM completely stomped Cloud9 in this game because I do think a lot of Cloud9's mistakes, especially in that like early towards the end of the early game and at the beginning of the mid game, like they were making mistakes. But TSM like they had a strong early game, they capitalized on mistakes, and they closed out the game. And I feel like to be at least a decent team in the league, like you're ticking all the boxes there. Like, if you're a top team, if you want to be the best team, like you're smashing early game, you're playing your mid game solid, and you're closing out leads. And just to be a decent team, like you got to survive the early game, punish mistakes, and close out well. And that's what TSM did. And if the dream scenario happens where they go 3-0, like fuck, who knows? Like maybe they make the run, like TSM script is activated, but it's looking like a long shot for them. But presumably, if they have another solid weekend where they can look like this from this past weekend, like that would at least alleviate some of the pain going into the offseason from the TSM fans at least. And then it might even give TSM themselves like some more to think about.
It's pretty easy for teams to just give up and kind of die when like it's so doomed. Obviously, they decided not to do that, and I don't think that teams should ever do that, but we have seen it happen. So it was nice to see TSM show up for a weekend. They get the 2-0, especially needed when there's even more TSM controversy. That was pretty nice. I don't have anything more on TSM. Anything else on Immortals before we move on?
Mortals is dog shit.
Yeah, their game against 100 Thieves was kind of sleeper. They didn't really do anything,
They did
honestly.
nothing.
They went top, and I think they dove top, and Revenge got like a 20 CS lead by like 5 minutes, and then you know what happened to the lead after that. It was gone. So Revenge face checked the brush, even though the support was missing for like, I don't even know, 2 minutes or whatever, and he died, and then the lead went goodbye, and that's just another Immortals game. So let's go over to Counter Logic Gaming. Uh, Definitely looking better as well. I would point to them similarly in a way that I would TSM. CLG is again not an amazing team all of a sudden, but they're definitely better than they were give it a month ago, and I would say the same thing about TSM. So I think they're kind of even on that kind of they're on that path to looking better. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, like they obviously had a really tough weekend just because of the caliber of teams they were playing. They played TL and Cloud9, and honestly, like they were doing fine in the early game in both of those
Yeah.
games. Like you could just kind of tell that Cloud9 and TL are obviously the better teams. They have better individual players. Their team fighting is better. Their coordination is better. And you saw that in the mid and late game team fights. But CLG managed to keep it close and competitive in the early game and towards the early parts of the mid game. And you kind of just saw like the better team win. And I think in CLG's case right now, like it's like, totally acceptable that the better team won when you played the first and second place team and you kept it competitive in the early game.
Yeah, 100%. They definitely in both games looked a lot better in the early game, and I would say I don't know how much of a hot take this is. You let me know if this is hot or not. I thought CLG looked better this week in their 0-2 than they did last week in their 2-0. I actually, it's hard to see that when you're playing against what are obviously the top two teams. So I don't know, J&T, is that a hot take or is that just normal?
I guess I haven't really given any thought to their games from a week and a half ago now, so.
Yeah. Because even in their 2 wins, I didn't think they looked particularly great. I just thought their opponent looked pretty shit. Unfortunately, this past weekend, their opponents were the best two teams, and so it's hard to look good in that. I thought their best player this weekend was Poom. Look, there's a lot of people that are going to point to Hansama, myself included, as to like why you keep face checking brushes when you're playing Zeri and you could W the bush or you could even ward over the wall, and he keeps getting picked off. But Poom is the one punishing those mistakes, and I say all the time on this podcast that like, yes, you can point the finger at people making mistakes, but you should also praise the people that are punishing those mistakes. And I thought Poom was doing that this weekend, so I thought Poom deserved a little bit of a shout out for that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think CLG's bot lane is like, dare I say, good. Like, I don't know. Like, I've thought that they're average for the majority of the season, and they still continue to play decent not look terrible in lane, and actually get kills in the 2v2 against a lot of these other strong bot lanes in the league. Like, I'm trying to think, like, they obviously had that really great, first game against Cloud9 towards the beginning of the season. I recall they kind of like were going even / winning lane in this game. They got that, like, I remember them getting 2v2 kills against FBI and Huhi. Like, they're a good laning duo. Like, I like CLG's bot lane a lot, actually.
I
The
would
rest of the
say they're
team, the rest of the team is kind of beans, but
I would say
I
their
like their
bot
bot
lane
lane.
is I would say their bot lane is okay. Reason being that I think they've looked a lot better as of late. Even though the whole split long we've said this is the best part of this team, I still didn't think they looked particularly great early on. But I mean, when everything's on fire, it's hard to look that way. Lately, I would say they've looked a little bit better, so I can give them a little bit more credit. But again, I would say they're okay. I wouldn't necessarily say good yet. But I'll have to remind people that, like, this is a bot lane that's not supposed to be good yet per se. Like, this is a very young and it's a developmental roster, and so you should manage your expectations when it comes to a lineup like CLG. The other thing that I saw this weekend is I actually thought Jenkins had a pretty good weekend, considering he's going up against what are probably the two best laners in the top lane. You could probably throw Someday in that conversation, but definitely Bwipo and Summit is like, you got your work cut out for you. And I would say that even though he lost both lanes, he actually looked pretty good later on. He was zoning the cannon off of flanks. He only ended up trading 1-for-1 when he was playing the GP against Summit. But however, if he doesn't trade 1-for-1 there, Summit flanks your whole team and murders all of them. And so I was like, that is a really good play out of Jenkins. Even against Bwipo, I think he was playing the Aatrox in that
Aatrox.
one. Yeah, and he even was able to kill Bwipo a couple of times, I think. With some help. He wasn't
Yeah,
solo kills,
with some assistance, but
but the
he got
point
him.
this still is though, yeah, you're setting up the kills. And so, like, I was like, okay, Jenkins, maybe your laning phase isn't that great, which by the way, almost no top laners laning phase is that great when you're playing against Bwipo and Summit. But in the mid to late game, he looked a lot more solid. And so I wanted to give a little bit of credit to him for that. Well,
Yeah, I don't know. CLG's improving.
yep.
There's, like, we talk about TSM and Immortals, like, they still have a chance to make playoffs. So does CLG. They have 5 wins. I think if they, like, their best possible chance to make it is them going 3-0. It's possible. They don't have a very hard schedule. They play Immortals, TSM, and EG. In their minds, that should be a really, like, conceivable 3-0. And should the pieces fall into place, like, they can make playoffs. And, obviously, is CLG going to do anything in
That would be
playoffs?
amazing.
No, but do I think that they are capable of being a 6th place team in the LCS? Maybe.
You almost said yes and just went with the maybe.
Well, I don't, because, like, are they the 6th best team in the LCS? No, but could they be? Maybe. Like,
Yeah, no,
they
honestly,
they,
it is,
they need they need
it
the
is,
rest of their team to play up to the level of their bot lane. Is it
I,
out
I
of the realm of possibilities? No, because I think Contracts is, like, decent when he's not running it down. Do I think their solo laners are terrible? Yeah, but, like, let's hope the bot lane is doing well.
I didn't mean to laugh at you for that. I just thought you were going to say yes, and then you just turned it into a maybe. And it was like your somewhat spicy take became pretty cold, pretty quick. Um, the last thing I'll say on CLG is pretty much most of the year, the first half of the split for sure, they were pretty much giving away all of the leads in the games, and it's gotten to the point now where they're forcing the other team to get those leads, and that is a definite improvement. That's something I've noticed as well. So, hats off to CLG for being what is obviously a developmental roster, performing like an okay roster, right? So, not too bad for them. Who is next on our list?
We got Golden
Mr.
Guardians
James
next.
250.
If in terms of what the playoff picture looks like right at this very moment, I think they are, like, they're obviously tied at 7 and 8 with Dig and EG. They can still make it. I mean, Golden Guardians, while I think they're at the bottom of that whole tiebreaker situation currently, like, LCS is going to get spicy in this last week because, like, playoff spots are up for grabs. Playoff seeding is even up for grabs. Like, there's still a world where TL can finish as the number 1 team. There's even a world where 100 Thieves finishes as the number 1 team in the league. So, Golden Guardians, to have a massive weekend coming up for them. They got the 2-0 this week, which was pretty good considering they had lost 5 in a row, I think, before that.
Yeah, they were on a skid.
Or they were 1
on
and
a
4,
losing
but
streak.
they were looking really terrible, and they had a decent week this week.
Yeah, no, I thought they looked pretty good. The first guy I got a shout out is Licorice, because first of all, I was really happy that he picked the Fiora. However, I've said in the past, I don't really have a lot of faith in Licorice to carry these games. He did not throw his lead. He actually played really, really well. Okay, it was against Dignitas and it was against Fake God playing Tryndamere, not the strongest top laner in the league. But hey, you know what? He took a new pick and looked really, really good on it. So you got to give him credit for that. And then in the other game, he was playing Gnar. Who was he playing that into? I have that.
Irelia.
Kumo's Aurelia, right. And again, it's like, okay, well, he's up against Kumo. And I don't think Kumo played particularly well on the Aurelia either. But you picked Gnar into Aurelia. That's a tough lane, and he played well in that game as well. So I thought Licorice had a good weekend. Yeah, sure, his opponents weren't the strongest, but you know what? A good weekend is a good weekend. So good for Licorice because I think he needed a solid weekend performance because we haven't really seen much of that from him this year.
Yeah, Fiora is kind of like his pocket pick. I can't even like he's at like whenever he plays Fiora, it's been really good. Last time I remember him like having a good Fiora game was like against Griffin at Worlds 2019. That was like they were playing against Garen Yumi, I remember, and like the rest of Cloud9 was like kind of running it down, and Fiora, Lickers was like giga fed on Fiora, and like they threw that game, and they could have made it out of Worlds groups if they won that game, but whatever. Forget about that.
The other two standouts for me were Pride Stalker and Olive. Olive specifically on the Rise. He had two really good Rise ultimates on the when playing against FlyQuest. The one he like positioned it right where Johnson was running to try to join his team, where like I think Johnson either has to use the Zeri dash to completely take himself out of the fight now, or he tries to go in and hopes that the Rise can't kill him. Well, he went in and then he just completely blew up. Um, the Zeri, and pretty much I think that was kind of what won them the team fight. And then Pride Stalker also same kind of thing. In actually in that same team fight, he ends up saving. Who did he save? He uses the Xin ulti to knock the Viego away, and Viego was about to reset on this team. I think it was a Nautilus that he saved because I remember thinking if he gets this resetting with Nautilus is huge, right? You get the hook and the auto, and then you just purely burst them down. That was another play where Pride Stalker looked like an absolute beast and saved that team fight from going absolute disaster mode. And then in his Hecarim game, he was kind of 1v9, even though he would die in some of these fights. There was a lot of time where he's on the back line, 1v2ing or 1v3ing as Hecarim for a long time, letting his team win the team fight on the other part of the map. So I thought Pride Stalker looked really good as well. Good weekend from those two guys. Not much to say from the bot lane for me. It was just kind of a whatever weekend.
Yeah, Brad Soccer is actually he's been like consistently pretty good for the most part of the split. He seems like another kind of good, like young European find that one of these LCS teams has found. Is he the next closer? I don't know. Like maybe he's looking pretty good. Like give it another split, and maybe he could be. Maybe he does. End up getting picked up by a top team come like 2023. But it does seem like this roster that Golden Guardians put together is doing, pretty well for what I think it was expected to do. And
I think they're better than their record would indicate, but I've said that many weekends, and then every time I say that, they end up just putting up a stinker the next weekend. So I think this team can compete with 100 Thieves. I think they're just a little bit below them, and a little bit below EG. I think that this is probably like the fifth best team in the league right now, which is, I mean, not really a hot take. I think they're just kind of middle of the pack sort of thing, but a respectable team. And to your point, there wasn't really a lot of expectations coming out of this roster going into the year.
yeah, I think this team will probably end up like making playoffs just due to the nature of the teams that they're playing and also the other 8 and 7 teams, their schedule. Because we're gonna get to Dignitas in a sec, but Dignitas is probably fucked in the ass in terms
Well,
of making playoffs.
let's hop over to Dignitas then.
Yeah.
What are they?
Why do I
What
say they're
are
fucked in the
they?
ass? Because their schedule for this last Super Week is Cloud9, Team Liquid, 100 Thieves. And the way that it stands right now is like you pretty much need to get 8 wins to make playoffs in the majority of cases. Yeah, there's obviously the TSM dream scenario where you can make it in at 7 and 11, but realistically, you need at least 8 wins to make it in, and I don't see Dignitas them making it. I assumed this was going to be a playoff team purely because I had them going 2-0 this past weekend, and they
They went
disappointed.
0-2?
Yeah, they went 0-2. They disappointed. They looked pretty bad. I feel bad for the Dignitas boys because I actually think this team is like better than their record as well. Like you kind of feel that with Golden Guardians. I feel that way with Dignitas.
Yeah, I think they're good. I wouldn't put them far behind Golden Guardians though, and I think they're kind of on par. It would be nice to see a best of 5 between those two teams. Whether that's going to happen, I don't know, but I think that would be fun to see a best of 5 between Dig and Golden Guardians. That would be pretty cool. Um, I'll put a little bit of hopium in there for Dignitas here. If there's a time to face Team Liquid or Cloud9, maybe now is the better time after C9 loses to TSM and
Yeah,
after
maybe.
TL has slumped a little bit. That is some copium though, because I am going to be predicting them to lose both of those games. but I
Spoilers.
mean, it is true though. If you have to play those teams, now is probably the better time to play them. Especially because they kind of know they're locked in playoffs, and we have seen them trying out new shit, especially TL. Well, maybe C9 as well, actually. Both teams have been trying a bunch of different shit, so maybe it's a good time to play those teams. I don't know. As far
Yeah.
as their performance this weekend, where do we start with Dignitas this weekend?
Well, like,
Hmm.
do we even talk about their game versus EG? Because I'm pretty sure we both said that we almost fell asleep during that game.
Yeah, Fake God got absolutely shit on by Impact. The thing is, we've seen lots of Gragas versus Trin this year, and I don't think we seen them get stomped this hard. I remember there was one time Hooney kind of got beat a little bit, but I feel like this Gragas kind of got
Dude, he got owned.
hard stomped. Yeah. Um, he was down like 30 CS or something by 15 or 16 minutes, and he gave up the whole tower. And like most of the Gragases have been like an answer to the Tryndamere, where like no one really wins the lane, and you kind of just both scale up. But that's not exactly what happened here, and it was like, well, come on, Fake God. But also, I don't really expect more, if I'm being completely blunt.
Yeah. Um, I think if you put a different top laner on Dignitas, this team would actually be like pretty good.
I
Because
noticed Solo tweets out after the Dignitas game. Solo tweets out something along the lines of like he tweeted out like, "You have my number," or like, "I'm a
dude,
free
like,
agent, by the way." He's
hit
tweeted
up
out a couple times
Solo,
along those
hit up
lines.
Lorlo, like hit up some of these guys who actually performed well when they were in LCS and just haven't like managed to find a spot since then. Like,
Yeah.
dude, Lorlo was like doing well for Dignitas when he was actually playing in Season 10 Summer, and they kept playing that Inter Viper. Like, what the fuck is that
We've
guy?
been
Dude,
talking, you and I have been
is he even
talking about
on?
Lolo since we started this podcast, like in like a year, almost
Dude,
2 years
he
ago now.
deserves to be on an LCS team. I truly
But here's the
believe
thing,
that.
maybe he doesn't want to anymore, because isn't his stream kind of popping off?
I mean, not really, but it's better than it was before because of Champions Queue. He's not like
Yeah.
he's like a 1K.
That's pretty damn good, man. For Lorlo, no offense, but like not exactly the biggest LCS star.
Well, I
1K
mean,
viewers is pretty damn good.
yeah, it's higher sometimes. But I think before, like, he was around like 300-400.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe he wants to play, maybe he doesn't. That's all speculation. But I think you'll agree with this point that like there's got to be someone better. No offense to Revenge and Fake God and sort of Kumo. I think Kumo is definitely the better performer of those three, but there's got to be some top laners that are out there that are not this bad.
Dude,
Yeah.
even like Darshan or something. Like, he's better than all three of those guys.
Yeah, probably, but
Like, is Darshan anything special? Like, no, obviously,
not
but like,
really.
he's not gonna int the game. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
this guy ints the game on the reg.
Yeah, he should. There should be other guys out there that should be able to hold their own, and also you should be able to hold your own on a Gragas versus a Tryndamere matchup. Like it's not really, but whatever. I've said my piece on that. Okay, something good actually about Dignitas. I thought that play by Neo with the Aphelios play where he shoots the ulti and flashes the Kai'Sa W to kill. Who was that? Who was that? Who were they playing against? Oh, it was against Lost. Lost was on the Kai'Sa. That was a pretty sick play. That was kind of pog. So pop off to Neo there. And the other thing too, there was a part this weekend or a play this weekend where Neo looked totally noob because he got hooked by Nautilus on Vulcan's Nautilus specifically. Do you remember which one I'm talking about? It was around mid lane. He gets hooked by the
Um,
Nautilus and he ends up flashing into a bunch of EG players. And I looked at that at first and was like, what the fuck was that play? But then when I rewatched it, I saw, oh, Biofrost was over there on Tom Kench. And as he flashed over, Biofrost uses his W to go back. So you know how like
oh
when there's
yeah,
a
yeah,
Caitlyn ulti, like you see it all the time with the Caitlyn ulti, right? Both guys flash to try to block and they end up, yeah, it was one of those. It was
I
one of those
see.
that the timing was a little off. And when I first saw it, I was like, Neo, what the fuck was that flash? And I was like, I see what happened. But anyways, I thought Neo actually looked pretty good this weekend, but fortunately not good enough to pick up any dubs.
Well, next up, the last of our 7 and 8 teams, we got EG. They went 1-1 this past weekend. They obviously beat Dignitas, which you just talked about, and they lost to 100 Thieves. Was that the banger game?
Uh Yes, it was the banger game.
Dude.
It was a total snooze fest for the first 20, 30 minutes. I actually watching that game, the 100 Thieves EG one, I was actually sitting in my chair like this. For people listening, I was legit just eyes closed, laid back in my chair, just waiting for something to happen. And then it became an absolute banger of a game. That game was actually awesome. A lot of areas you could point to where it's like, why didn't EG do this or why didn't 100 Thieves do that? And I will get into those, but I will, before I do that, I will say just a little disclaimer that like these hectic late 50-minute game bangers, there's always going to be stuff where the teams look back and be like, I wish I would have done that, or I wish I would have done that. But quite the game, quite the game.
Yeah, like, dude, that game was insane. Like, I was in the same boat as you. Like, the game was so boring. Like, I'm pretty sure I had that on my second monitor, and like at that point, I was just like watching other YouTube videos because like I didn't give a shit about the game because like, well, it's obvious 100 Thieves is gonna win this. They just got sold. They're outscaling, and then you know what even happened? Like, EG they didn't steal Baron, but they like made a play, wiped 100 Thieves like 4 for 0. They got Elder, and then they got Baron. And then they basically stalled out the game for another 6 minutes while the next major objective spawned. They then won the next fight and were at Elder Drake while Abadage TF ultis into the Baron pit. Smite steals the Elder away. As, you know, because like EG at the time was like trying to force an Elder play and then like base because like Someday was Someday was doing a really good job in that game of like splitting in the side lane because he was winning the 1v1 against Impact so hard. And he was like constantly pressuring like top lane inhib. And Someday is pushing top lane inhib. He steals the Elder. EG has to now run away and base so that they can go defend their top lane inhib. And at the same time, Danny started running down mid lane and like killing mid inhib and like trying to end the game. Like, dude, the game was just like so exciting in like a 10-15 minute period of time where like it was just like turning out to be like one of the most boring LCS games of the season. It was just, dude, it was like so fucking entertaining. Like, I don't care that game was a fiesta. Like, I had way too much fun.
Yeah, it was like it turned into a great game and was one of the better games, even though it started off like pure dog shit. The first place that I'll point to where I thought EG could actually win this game was the one time they secured Elder, and they even I think they had one pick as they're pushing down mid. Do you remember this? And
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have maybe 10, maybe 20 seconds left on Elder, maybe not even 20. Like it was close, and they decide to pull back. However, they have so at this point, if you let the Elder fall off, they have mid inhibitor, but 100 Thieves have both side lane inhibitors. And so the game state at this point, like I think 100 Thieves was probably up like 7K, but after all this, the gold is pretty much even. But if you let the game, if you don't try to end the game there, now it's like your two side lane inhibitors are down and to their just one mid lane, which is like obviously heavily favored for 100 Thieves. That I thought EG would try to force the dive even under the two Nexus turrets, because I think your chances of winning that game are higher, even if you're dying two Nexus turrets, while you have just that 10-15 seconds left of Elder. I think it is worth. But they don't go for it. I like you didn't even see like a Nautilus hook. What I thought Vulcan would do is throw his hook, and even if it misses, aim it so that if it misses, it at least hits one of the towers, dragging you in range of someone to hit ulti. Everyone dog piles because you have Elder buff, or like even if you're killing a tank, that unit that champion will die because you have Elder. And I think that's the fight you need to take. They decide to back off, and now they're in this scenario where like they just can't take anything else on the map. They're just kind of screwed, and like it's all at that point it was back in 100 Thieves' hands to win or lose the game again. And I don't think that I don't think that's an easy decision to make, but I think it's the right decision to make because otherwise you're putting the game in 100 Thieves' hands rather than your own by trying to finish off the game there.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of ended up like working out in their favor because once like the next rotation of major objectives spawned, like they got that initial pick on the closer where I think they hooked him in, they forced closer to burn the ulti backwards, and then when closer went on the re-engage, like he instantly got blown up by like all of EG, and then that's like when the next Elder Drake started, where Abadage did end up stealing it while they had Summit in the side lane,
Yeah.
or not Summit, Someday, sorry, but banger game, like banger game.
It was, dude, the very last team fight where Danny is going nuts on the Zeri, right? Like he is in there, and the 100 Thieves players are on a sliver of health, man, and Danny just gets flash shotgunned in the face by Graves.
Yeah.
It was like, oh man, I thought he was gonna do it. I really did. I thought we were about to see one of those Zeri moments. Like as the team fight starts, I'm going, oh, this is going to be one of those montage plays that everyone's going to talk about how this champion is so busted. Like, you know how we saw those plays with Viego like a year ago, or maybe it
I
was
mean,
a
the
year and a half
champion's
ago.
still broken.
Yeah, whatever. I thought it was going to be one of those where you just see them clean up the whole team and everyone go, that champion's busted. And then someday just shotgunned him in the face, and that story got put to bed pretty quick. But really close and a nice effort by Danny. Yes, there's some like minor micro things that he messed up in that fight
Yeah, he
that
missed like 2 Qs on like
I'm
1 HP
sure
targets.
I'm so positive that he went back and watched that team fight like 10 times and went, oh, if I would have done this and if I would have done that. But like that shit's gonna happen in team fights. No one plays a perfect team fight almost ever, so it happens.
Already, we got
But EG's looking pretty good though, right? EG, like, as the years gone on, they've started to look better, and like this is a team that most people are going to put in the playoffs. Now it's
next up.
FlyQuest.
FlyQuest, they're sitting at 8-7, so they're in a much more advantageous spot for securing playoffs. I'm pretty sure, like, in their case, there's only like one scenario where they don't make playoffs, and like that's if they go 0-3 and both Golden Guardians and EG goes 3-0 and 2-1. Like that's the only way they don't make playoffs. But FlyQuest, they're most likely in. They went 1-1 this week, right?
Yes, because they beat TL.
Yes, they did, and they lost to
Golden Guardians.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, here. Well, start talking. I'm losing my train of thought here.
I did not like the weekend that we saw out of Takui. Our regular listeners will know that I love Takui. I think that guy's Pog, but I did not think he looked that good on the Syndra, which to me is one of his better champions, so I was a little bit disappointed by that. He got picked off like 3 times in that Golden Guardians game, and I don't know, every time I think they were even winning that game at first. I believe they had a lead and they kind of threw it to Golden Guardian, so I was a little bit disappointed with that. Um the other guy that I want to talk about is Johnson. I actually thought Johnson had a pretty good weekend. Um Specifically, he was pretty much the reason they won against Team Liquid. Now, you could point to Team Liquid just making really dumb mistakes, and that is absolutely true. But if I'm going to give Poom the credit for punishing the mistakes of TL, well, why wouldn't I do the same thing with Johnson? And Johnson's Tristana kind of popped off in that game. I don't know why Whippo's walking up to a Tristana with like not a lot of HP, but he did. And Johnson went, I'm gonna fucking kill you now, and he did that. So John, and then he had the triple kill top lane as well, which ended up going to Baron. And so pretty much Johnson, I think, was the main reason they win that game against TL. And even even in the game against Golden Guardians, he was playing pretty well up until the throw. I mentioned earlier how Olive positioned that Rise ulti like right underneath Johnson. I think Johnson should have played that fight a little bit better, but I think it was partially like a really nice Rise ulti as well. Anyways, mostly good weekend out of Johnson, I guess is the short of it.
Mm-hmm. I thought like his game against Team Liquid on his Shoshana was just really, really good because he managed to pretty much escape the early game unscathed. Like, you know, obviously, like, TL was throwing heavy pressure topside. Like, they were playing as much as they could possibly play around Whippo, having Bjergsen and Santorin roam up, drop Thrift Heralds for him, bring Bjergsen up to dive with the Ahri. Like, I think he went top, like, 3 times in, like, the first 9 minutes of the game. I think he went 1 time pre-level 6 to threaten a dive in which they got Takui to burn his TP. And they came up at level 6, killed Kumo, and then came up again for the Rift Herald fight. Like, pretty much the game was in Whippo's hands, and as you kind of mentioned before, like, he made some pretty just bad mistakes in that game, you know, walking up to Johnson in the side lane with, like, 2/3 HP, and, you know, he's playing Hail of Blaze Tristana, like, you're just going to die every time. After he took the bottom inhibitor, when he killed the inhib, and he just decided to stay around to push a wave and killed himself right before Drag spawned, or maybe not, like, right before it spawned, but, like, Drag was spawning, like, a minute and a half later, and, like, they basically just lost all control of the map, and you know, they kind of like bled out drags where FlyQuest got the first 2 drags and then TL got 3 drags in a row and then FlyQuest just came back and got the last 2 because like TL kept making mistakes and, you know, you're going to win that game with like scaled Trist, scaled Vigor, and a Hextech Soul.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add on FlyQuest. The one thing I will say is that extra win they have is ridiculously valuable because I do not think they're playing like a playoff team right now. If we were to do power rankings for how good the teams are playing, I wouldn't put this team as a playoff team. I know they beat Team Liquid, and I know people are like, well, they beat Team Liquid. How are they not? Guys,
TL
FlyQuest has
did a
not been playing
hardcore
that
throw.
good lately. They have not been playing that good lately. And yes, there are those weekends where they look really, really good, but as of late, most of them are not. very, very good. And I think they need to shore up some things before I can say they are worthy of making a playoff run, for example. And honestly, even though I realize like it's probably likely that they make playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised if they miss playoffs. I would not. Um, I guess they play EG, Immortals, and C9. So I guess I'm predicting them to go 1-2 this weekend. So
Yeah, I
I don't
mean,
know if
with
they go
them
one and
winning
two.
one
I don't know
game,
what if they go 1-2, I don't know what their chances are of making playoffs. But I fully expect them to go 1-2 and end up 9-9 on the year.
yeah, if even though with them just winning one game, it's like extremely likely they make playoffs. Then
Okay.
it's still like it's very possible for them to go 0-3 and EG to go 3-0 and Golden Guardians to then go either 2-1 or 1-2, and either make it over FlyQuest in the case they go 2-1 or play tiebreaker in the case that they go 1-2. So FlyQuest, as long as they win one game, they're probably gonna make it. But if they go 0-3, it could get a little spicy.
Okay. And next up, we have 100 Thieves, right?
Yep, they're on a 5-game win streak. I wouldn't say like they're looking insane. Like, oh my god, like this team is gonna beat Cloud9 and Team Liquid, but like they're getting to that point. It feels like it feels like they're a lot more consistent than they were for pretty much the majority of the split.
I don't think we've seen them at their peak yet, but I mean, when you see a team win 5 in a row, you will start to say like, okay, there's obviously got to be some things that they're looking better with. For me, I don't really want to talk about the Mortals game. I think that one was kind of a snoozer. I want to point more at the EG one because I know we talked about this game already, but I didn't talk about it from the side of 100 Thieves. I mentioned what EG should have done. When there is an Elder fight happening and you have Someday absolutely smashing the Gnar, like he's playing the Graves into the Gnar, and he's absolutely smashing the top lane. He hard chunks the Gnar. The Gnar just used Mega, or just ran out of his Mega, his Gnar bar, and he's like, I don't know, 30% HP, and your team is fighting for the Elder. I think Someday needs to TP there. And this could be a team call. This might not be a Someday thing. This might be a 100 Thieves thing. You need to TP to that fight and 5v4 at Elder. Like, yes, getting the inhibitor is valuable, but if you win that Elder fight, you get all the fucking inhibitors you want. So, like, screw the inhibitor, TP over to that. And even if you TP right in front of them and they blow everything on you, now they've used all their resources on you, and your team can 4v4 the rest of their fight without the other team having so many cooldowns. So I think for sure you should always TP there. There's no way the Gnar can answer because he's on 30% HP and has no Mega Gnar. Like, I was really surprised they had Someday stick top lane and not TP to that Elder fight. I think they just straight up win the game there if they do that.
Yeah, still think for the most part, like 100 Thieves did a really good job of playing around the side lanes in that game. With Someday specifically, like this game was kind of all about Someday, and I think at a certain point, like 100 Thieves did sort of screw up. Well, yeah. After that play where they got wiped 4-0, and then EG took both Elder and Baron at 34 minutes, 100 Thieves kind of realized, like, hey, we're getting a bit outscaled there. And I think they did a really smart job of just transitioning into, like, a 4-1 style of game. Yeah, obviously, you mentioned, like, there are situations where they probably should have brought Someday to the team fight, even though in their minds, they probably think it's a better idea to keep him in the side lane. But when he's winning that side lane 1v1 so hard and he's forcing Impact to run back to base or even, go back to base and have to TP, like, that's 8 seconds. Because, like, dude, recall takes 8 seconds. Like, that's an 8-second advantage you have in the team fight where, hey, I'm going to be able to cast my TP first and be in the fight auto-attacking and using spells and dealing damage anywhere between, like, 8 and 12 seconds before the enemy top comes. And, I think 100 Thieves did a good job of recognizing how to shift up the game state when they did sort of fall behind in the 5v5. But at the same time, like, they still got to recognize, like, Sunday's the strongest member on our team. And if he's not here in these team fights, it's just going to make it extremely difficult.
I think you make a really good point there. Because maybe you might be right where they're saying like, look, we don't win fights anymore, and so maybe that's originally what the plan is like, look, we don't win fights anymore. You split and just 1v1 him because you win that. However, once you've won that to the point, like that's where I think you can't get stuck on one idea when the status quo changes, and that's where it did change, and that's where I think you should probably team. And that's probably what they were thinking. They were probably thinking something along the lines of what you were saying, where we don't win a team fight anymore, just stay in the side lane. But eventually, if things change, you need to be able to adapt, and rather than just stick to one plan if things change. If that makes any sense. But yeah, you make a good point that they were probably thinking they were outscaled because that totally could have been the case.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, any other standouts from 100 Thieves? on the weekend?
I mean, for me, I still think that this team right now is like the closer and someday show. I think
Hmm.
Abadage is getting better and he is dying less, which is obviously very important. If they want to
Yep.
be a good team, they want to be a consistent team. And I just think their bot lane, like, they're solid, but they're not at that same level as they were last year. And, that doesn't necessarily make them a weaker team. It just doesn't make them as strong of a team.
Yeah, no, and that's totally fair. I think that it is the story that has been the story, but I think it does continue to be the story. That they are not playing to their full potential. And can that happen? Yeah, sure. They are starting to look better, but this 5 game win streak hasn't been all that clean. We just mentioned the EG game. Obviously, that was not a clean game, even though it was an absolute banger. And then there was like they're down 10 or 11K to Golden Guardians game. Like, come on, you shouldn't win that game. So it's nice to look at 5 wins, but let's be realistic. These 5 wins have not been clean wins. Not all of them, anyways.
And they haven't necessarily been playing the best teams.
Yeah, I can't remember who that they've all played, but that's probably the case. So fair enough. Who's next?
We got Team Liquid next. We did talk about their sort of into game against FlyQuest, where Whippo was having some fun in the side lanes of that game. But they had their other game was against. Man, my memory is usually my strength here.
Let me tell you. TL played CLG and
CLG,
FlyQuest.
yes. Okay, yeah, that was the Whippo Tryndamere game where he just completely ran over Jenkins. I remember now. But
I
yeah, I mean,
apologize. I'm slightly distracted at the moment.
that's fine. I mean, looking at this TL team, they're obviously one game out of first place behind C9, and that's primarily due to the fact that they lost to Cloud9 in that second head-to-head matchup. But it was looking really, really good for TL in the sense that Cloud9 dropped a game to TSM on Saturday, and it was looking like, hey, like TL is going to be able to tie it right back up in the standings, and we're most likely going to, a tiebreaker match at the end of the season. Because both these teams have been looking so good, and I don't think anybody was going to doubt that Cloud9 was going to like crash and burn at the end of the season.
Hmm.
But if TL doesn't lose that game against FlyQuest, they're tied with Cloud9. These teams are both presumably going to go 3-0, and then you get that fight for the number 1 seed, where you're going to have side selection advantage in the first BO5 matchup. Which, I mean, side selection is like super, super vital in best of fives, especially when it's two teams of a very high caliber like Cloud9 and Team Liquid, and that second place finish it's probably going to feel quite bad for TL because it was like in hindsight, like, dude, like all we had to do was beat FlyQuest and we're
Yeah, and
playing
FlyQuest
tiebreaker
is,
for number 1 seed.
as we just said, FlyQuest is not looking that good right now. Like, this is kind of bad. And here's, to be fair, I mentioned earlier, TL is trying a bunch of new picks at the moment. Like, we saw the Shen, which I think looked great. We saw the Taric, which I didn't think looked that great, but that to me wasn't a Taric is bad. It was a, I think if you play Taric, you need some sort of engage tool that goes with it so that you can time your immunity on the Taric ulti with some hard engage, and they didn't really have that. So, like, I don't think the drafts were particularly that great. I don't think that excuses the gameplay, though. Definite Bean Soup award to Whippo this weekend. Even last weekend, he looked pretty bad against C9 specifically, but this weekend he was kind of throwing as well. His Lucian had a huge lead in lane, to be fair. He was popping off in lane, and then he just overstayed twice, maybe 3 times, at least twice, where like I couldn't figure out what was going on. Like, it was one of those where if you're in that game, you're question mark pinging because you're like, what was that play? Um, and I think Bwippo would probably say the same thing. He just doesn't look good right now, and I don't know what happened because he was looking like the best player in the league in the first couple of weeks, but he's not anymore. I don't know what changed with him. He's still like, look, it's still Bwippo. I wouldn't be on full panic mode if I'm a Team Liquid fan, but it is a little bit of a head scratcher that you see in back-to-back weeks, him being the reason why they're losing games. Because for me, he was the reason they lost the C9 one. Sure, it's against C9, but now FlyQuest? Come on, man. Come on.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny, like on social media and like in the Reddit post game threads, like you can kind of see like people commenting in like with fanatic flares, and they're just like first time, huh? Or like basically just saying like, dude, like Bubba's like he has his fair share of like int games and int moments over in the LE scene over in EU.
Yeah.
But we know that this is a guy that is very strong in lane, will contend with the summits and the some days of the world come playoff time, and presumably this team is going to be a lot better when Whoopo is not having fun in the side lane.
Yeah, and I do want to keep seeing the new picks. I think it's fun to see him play like the
Yeah,
Lucian or
I
whatever
was
it is,
looking at
right?
his champions, and like his last games have been Lucian, Tryndamere, Jax, Lucian, Shyvana, Gragas, Graves, Camille, Viego, Jace. Like, what is
Yeah,
that?
let's go.
Nine unique champions in 11 games.
Let's go. Does he have a bigger champion pool than Fudge? We'll talk about that in a sec when we talk about Cloud9. But does he have how
I don't
many
know.
champions has he
Let me
played this
see.
year? Are you able to check that up? Check that out
Including
real quick.
lock-in.
Yeah.
Let me see. I've changed that now.
As you go to look at that, oh, you're ready already? Okay, well, as you go to look at that, I just want to shout out Bjergsen real quick because I thought
17.
his Ari looked really okay. So they both have 17 actually, counting
Okay.
lock in. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I want to talk about Bjergsen. I thought his Ari looked great. However, it doesn't really matter how good your Ari looks if your team's just straight up throwing the game. Even Hans Sama looked pretty bad this weekend, like just really careless on the Zeri, getting picked off in places that I'm like, where are you going? The one team fight, he like flashes and slides over a wall where there's no way in hell anyone can peel for him over there. I think that was against CLG. I can't remember for sure. But I didn't think Hans looked that good this weekend either, which is like another kind of uh-oh if you're a Team Liquid fan. Is it full panic mode? No, because like it's like one or two bad weekends. Two for Bwipo, one for Ansama, if you ask me. But it's not something you want to see like a week or two before playoffs. So that's kind of like a little bit Monka-esque, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think TL fans are feeling a little bit better due to the fact that Cloud9 also lost to TSM and had that really bad game, because I don't think
Yeah.
you would be feeling as good. Like, if you lost to FlyQuest and C9 just had another really clean 2-0, and then you're 2 games up on them, and you're like, oh, fuck, like, we are not making tiebreaker for first. Like, it's not possible.
But you and I have mentioned a billion times on this podcast how like Bjergsen's kind of playing the more boring stuff, and he's not really playing any playmakers. Oh, that was more difficult than it should be. But he did that on the Ari this weekend and was making a lot of nice roams and plays and picks and all that stuff. So it's nice to see it. Do I think we're going to see a lot of it? Not really. I think he'll probably be back on the regular picks once playoff comes around, because again, you can play through pretty much anywhere on Team Liquid. So why force Bjergsen to be the carry when you have so many on the team, right?
I don't like watching Ari in competitive. Like,
I
it's
don't mind
just,
it.
it just feels so boring. Like,
Why though?
I don't know. It's just like, it's just push and roam, and then like when your ult's up, you ult on their face and you charm them, and they like have to blow flash no matter what. It just feels like you know exactly what's gonna happen when Ari's in the game.
Yeah. I don't know. I like to see the champions that have some decent mobility. You get that with their ultimate, and so there is some skill expression in Ari, because if you miss the charm, you are pretty fucking useless. So it's like a lot of your um a lot of your performance depends on landing a skill shot. Yeah, I know you could chain it with I always forget the active, you're gonna tell me.
Everfrost.
Yep. But still, I still think you see some decent skill expression in Ari.
I
Maybe
just
not
think
as
when
much
you,
as other like assassins would, but yeah,
yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't
I
mind the
just
Ari.
think with like the spammability of the ult and just like the constant CC chains that you have with like Charm plus Everfrost, like it just feels like a really low risk, high reward champion, because the lane gets auto priority when you hit level 9 because you one shot the entire wave. That gives you control. You get to go bot, you get to
Yeah,
go top, you get to take vision, and it's like, okay, I missed my charm, or I ulted and I missed my charm. Guess what? I'm doing it
I
again
can
in
ult
1
right
minute.
back out.
And your flash cooldown is 5 minutes, or if you're taking Cosmic Insight, it's like 4 minutes, 15 seconds. And I think, when you compare it to a champion like TF is, I think, it's like high risk, high reward, because it's a champion that can be kind of exposed in lane, is very flash reliant when you are up against like other assassin champions or a huge ganking jungler, whether it's like, I don't know, like a Jarvan or a Xin Zhao or a Volibear. Like, your flash key is like vital to you surviving in the lane. But you get much higher payoffs with Tistifate because you have that huge ultimate to make big plays. But in that case, like, TF ult is like 2-minute 30 cooldown, but like Ari ult's a minute cooldown. Like, you don't give a fuck.
It is.
You just
No,
press it whenever. I
you are
just don't
kind
like
of
it.
right. You are kind of right in the sense that like she reminds me a little bit of LeBlanc, where like she can go in, but if things don't go well, she comes right back out. Like that's kind of annoying. So I actually kind of agree a little bit with what you're saying. That's a part that I don't really like, and maybe with her having uh too many ulties. What's the word? Oh Jesus.
Charges?
Too many charges. Thank you.
They just
Maybe
need to
that's
nerf.
something
Dude,
that's a little bit
I don't think.
frustrating.
I think the charge thing is fine. Like, when they reworked it, you get a charge on. You get an extra charge per takedown. I think that's fine. Like, just nerf the cooldown of it. Make it a 2-minute ultimate. Like I want to say it's like 80 seconds level 1. Like make
So
it
it
2
could be
minutes.
more punished, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Yeah,
Make
that could be
it 2
fair.
minutes. And like at rank 2 and rank 3, like make it like 180, 160, 140, or not 180, sorry, because that would be 3 minutes, but like 120, 180. Because you rush CDR anyway. Like you rush like Ludens, or not Ludens, Lucidity Boots, you rush Everfrost, you just rush Ability Haste. Like it's cringe, dude. I don't like it.
I would agree with the nerf to the ulti. Next up is Cloud9.
They had their little scare against TSM, but I mean, for the
Okay,
most part,
as the Cloud9 fan, JNT, tell us, how do you feel? How much panic should there be, if any at all?
well,
in
I
the
mean,
first place?
similar to the TL in TL's fans' eyes, like since TL lost to FlyQuest and we still have a 1-game advantage on them, like I'm feeling fine because we're just gonna go 3-0 and we're locked in first seed. Let's go.
So no, you're not worried whatsoever. I first want to start off by talking about Fudge. I tweeted this, so you know where I'm going with this. He played 17 champions, man, and this is a new role. Like I realized we talked about Bwipo also playing 17 champions. How long has Bwipo been playing top lane for, right? Like it is way more understandable, and it's still impressive to have a champion ocean like that. But it is way more impressive to me to be playing a brand new role and be playing all these champions. And look, let's be honest, Fudge has not been the best player on C9, so he doesn't need to be a carry, but he's not a liability either. And that's what blows my mind, because you should probably be a liability if you're playing 17 unique champions in 25 games, counting lock in. If you're brand new to a role, like that should be a liability thing. So when I saw that today, I was like, holy crap, like that is pretty impressive.
Hmm.
Even if he didn't have the most impressive weekend, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I mean, I guess
Kind of
like
got outplayed by Takeover,
the
to
only
be honest.
thing
But
that you would say is cause for concern is like this was like Summit's like one of his worst games in like a long time, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit when we were talking about TSM, but Summit was just playing super disrespectful in the side lane, like pushing up with no vision, pushing up, sometimes with no vision and no jungle help. And, he was getting constantly picked up in the side lane. And I think credit to TSM as well, because I think, in my eyes, like player of that game was Spica 100%. Was doing a great job of punishing Cloud9's over aggressions in the side lane, was doing a great job of burning Fudge's flash constantly in the game. Like Fudge didn't have flash for that like entire game basically, because Spica was always going mid on that flash cooldown. Takeover, like you said, was also doing a really good job in lane. Like he was just outplaying Fudge in lane. And Huni was, maybe he wasn't outplaying Summit in lane, but was just doing a better job of controlling the lane and getting attention when he probably called for it and when was necessary. And yeah, I mean, I guess the draft, like looking back on it, the Cloud9 draft is like kind of shit because they have like full AP Veigar, full AP Kai'Sa, and they have Nautilus. So you're like super incentivized to build Mercury Treads, which is also really good against Volibear because he's dealing like kind of split magic damage. Plus, like you're then getting a bunch of tenacity that's good against Volibear, Veigar, and Nautilus. So I feel like in their eyes, like Cloud9 probably got a lot of their power picks. But like hindsight wise, like you kind of look at the draft and it's like, wow, you build Merc Treads and your whole fucking team's countered, and that's exactly what happened. Like they just built Merc Treads and stacked MR, and C9 like couldn't do anything once the game went late and they got Ocean.
yeah, I would agree with you that Summit didn't have the greatest game against TSM, so that was something. But I mean, we've also seen him be an absolute monster all split long, so that's not too much cause for concern. On the more good side, Blabber had an amazing Lee Sin kick, and I think Blabber probably had the best weekend out of all the Cloud9 players. I thought he looked like a beast, especially in the Lee Sin game. That guy is everywhere, man. And it seems like it's that way every game. Even in the TSM game, he had a lot of games go pretty well early. Even though yes, they didn't win that game, like Blabber's still making plays even in losing games. And so I have nothing but good things to say about Blabber once again. He's been an absolute monster, and it's just what we've come to know out of Spring Split Blabber.
So if you had to pick, right, who are you giving MVP to?
It's very close, but right now it's Blabber. It is very close. For me, it's between Blabber and Summit. And I think this weekend kind of pushed it in Blabber's favor. But I don't know. There's 3 games left. I still need a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Who is it for you?
Well, I thought you were gonna say Summit, and I was
Hmm.
gonna say Blabber anyway.
Oh, okay. I think most people would say Summit, though. Do you think that? Do you think most of the community would say Summit?
I think so, and I was gonna use like your previous point when season 10 when Blabber won MVP, and you were kind of like you were of the opinion that Niski should have won MVP because that was like a very mid jungle centric duo, and like Niski
Yeah.
was doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and Blapper was kind of like reaping a lot of the rewards of what Cloud9 was doing with their mid jungle synergy. Like Blapper just kind of came out the one looking really, really good. And I kind of feel like that's a bit of the scenario with, Summit and Blabber right now. Obviously, yes, like Summit is, a beast in lane and he smashes all the terrible laners. But when it comes to the other top laners in the league who are decent and like the matchup is quite even, like up against a Whip or against a Someday or even against like a Huni, because I still think Huni is like a pretty good player. Blabber does a lot to get Summit those early leads, so he is able to run over the game. And I think, you go back and look at Blabber this, but like he is smurfing like almost every single game. Like
Yeah, and just for clarification, when I said Niski should have won that MVP, I was not
oh
upset
no,
that Blabber won it. Just for clarification, I was of the opinion that Niski was MVP that split, but it was like, well, okay, like they were both kind of pog, and that's kind of what you're seeing right now with Summit and Blabber. It's like, again, I wouldn't be upset either way. It's clearly a duo that works really well together. Like, yes, Blabber is the one making the dives happen, but someone's got to set up the lane so that the dive is possible. And so it's like, you got to have players work together, and they work really well together to pull off these dives and get enormous leads in the top lane. So kudos to both of them, right? And if Summit wins MVP, I won't be surprised, nor will I be upset. But for me right now, I think it's a little bit more Blabber. It's kind of hard to say. They're both popping off.
mm-hmm.
Before we move on, I just want to shout out Anonymous in the live chat. Thank you for your sub. 5 months. We appreciate you. Big Pog. J&T, before we move on to the tier list, because we will get into the AD carry tier list in just a moment, I just want to ask you real quick, who's not making playoffs? Who are the 4 teams that you're keeping out of there?
So not making playoffs is
Mm-hmm.
TSM, Immortals, CLG, and Dignitas.
Okay, well, I guess we have the same picks there. So, never mind.
I mean,
I wasn't sure if we were gonna have the same, but that's pretty much my picks as well. And it's not even so much that I think Dignitas is worse. It is that the schedule they have left looks the worst
yeah.
for them. So
If I had to actually pick one, like for it to be different, I would say that it's probably more likely that CLG actually makes it.
Okay.
Because they have to play Immortals, TSM, and Evil Geniuses, and I think those are 3 winnable games for them. Therefore, that would put.
And if CLG were to make it, who else are you taking out?
Well, I guess in this case, I would take out EG.
Really?
Well, because like they would have to lose. Like they're just the team that has to lose because. I mean, I guess if they go 3-0 and Golden Guardians actually goes 0-3, they can make it. Yeah, it's one of either Golden Guardians and EG. I know, like, Golden Guardians and EG play each other on Friday. No, Saturday. And, like, that's a really important game for playoff standings and actually could push either one of those teams out of playoffs. So, CLG can make it, and whoever loses between GG and EG wouldn't make it, I guess.
Gotcha.
But, I mean, it's probably not going to happen. Like,
okay, let's get into the tier list now, because it was weird because when we saw the tier list come out on Twitter, like they do this stuff all the time with all the different roles. And for some reason, this one is one that really stuck, where there was like a lot more discussion further on. I knew Doublift did his own tier list, but I didn't know, I guess Dom did as well. And a bunch of people started doing their AD carry tier list. And I didn't know that when we had the conversation, like, hey, do you want to do our own AD carry tier list? Well, it looks like everyone's doing one. And so we're going to have ours.
mm-hmm.
How are we doing this? Do you have them? Are you pulling them up, or what's going on?
I'm pulling up ours.
Okay.
We'll go through ours, and we can talk about like differences between ours versus other ones that have been made public and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, let's start with talking about. Why am I having so much trouble this episode? Holy crap! Let's start off by talking about the ones where the 3 analyst desk guys came out. I believe it was Kobe. Was it Mark Z and Raz?
They did Raz, Jat, and Kobe.
Oh, it was Jat and Kobe. Because you and I looked at that and immediately thought Raz had the best one. Are you pulling ours up? Am I delayed on the stream? I don't see.
Oh, we can pull them up now. We're not talking about them now, so I didn't want to get people confused because we're going to talk about a bunch of names and stuff.
No, please do pull them up.
Okay, these are ours.
So why don't, before we get into those, then I'll let you list them off. Then give people, the listeners, the lowdown.
Okay, I'll go 1 through 10. My list first: Berserker, Hansama, Danny, Luger, FBI, Neo, Lost, Tactical, Johnson, Arrow, and I also put Wild Turtle in there because they're
Yeah.
like Apple, like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Blue Jays list: Berserker, Hansama, Danny, FBI, Neo, Luger, Johnson, Lost, Tactical, and Arrow.
So the biggest difference, I think, is you have Johnson 9, I have Johnson 7, but also you have Luger 4 and I have Luger 6. Those are the biggest discrepancies. Am I missing anything else?
That's about it.
But you and I both had Berserker number one. Now, the other thing, to be fair to the LCS analysts, is like they did this before the weekend, I'm pretty sure. Whereas like we get to do it after the weekend. However,
That wouldn't
I
have
would have
changed my answer.
exactly. I would have put Berserker ahead of Hansama anyways. It just made it a lot easier to do that after what I thought was a pretty disappointing weekend. But I just want to be fair to the LCS analysts. Now, I can't find I thought I was going to be able to find the LCS ones really quick. Oh, I do have them.
I
Um,
have them. I can read them out if.
the one that we thought was really accurate is Raz. Raz goes Hansama, Berserker, Danny, Neo, FBI, Luger, Johnson, Tactical, Lost, Arrow. That is almost the same as mine. The only difference is that he has Hansama 1. Um, and I
And
guess
he
he has
has,
Neo 4.
yeah,
Neo and
Neo and
FBI are
FBI
swapped,
swapped.
and that's pretty much the same. So, where do you think are like where do you want to start off with talking about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the biggest discussion point is, or I guess the most interesting one, because the biggest one is actually different, but the most interesting one and probably the more controversial ones was Hansama number one and Berserker number two. All three of the people on the analyst desk, those being Raz, Jat, and Kobe, had Hansama one over Berserker. And to be honest, if we want to exclude this weekend's performance, because I think it did make at least my decision like a lot easier. Like for me, like there left no doubts after this weekend. But if we exclude this past weekend's performance, I just think that Hansama and Berserker are very different AD carries in the way that they play.
Yes.
Hansama and Core GJ are super lane focused, like super lane focused. Like that is the strength of that bot lane, and the majority of the heavy lifting in the mid and late game is done by Bwipo and Bjergsen. Bjergsen is normally playing these very, late game scaling control mages that provide a lot of late game teamfight impact. And Bwipo is usually fed as hell on some sort of top lane aggressive champion, beating down some like dead weight top laner on the other team. Whereas I think, Hansama and Core JJ, they provide much more of that like early game facilitator role to, we're going to win the lane, we're going to get drag control, we're going to always basically swap for Herald. Like TL loves going for Herald swap fights. They very rarely will leave Hansama in the bot lane. At the very least, like they'll bring him up to mid lane and they'll have him push up mid waves while they're going for this Herald fight. And Berserker is pretty much the exact opposite, where Cloud9 really doesn't play bot centric at all. They leave Berserker on an island. He's usually on like a hyper scaling ADC. He's was pretty much on like Jinx Aphelios duty for the entire split. I think he played Kaisa once this weekend. He's played some Ezreal also a few games before that. But he's basically just like late game hyper scaling monster that doesn't make any mistakes in the late game. Like, dude, when I look at these Cloud9 wins, I can't point out like a single mistake from Berserker in the late game. Like he is just like mechanically perfect. I know going into the season, LS was like seriously hyping him up as the next like Gumayushi, because like Gumayushi was like in the shadows for so long because he was sat behind Teddy. And he basically had the same sentiment to say about Berserker, that Berserker's been in the shadows because Gumayushi is so good. And I was like, yeah, like you're just saying that because like Teddy was Teddy and Gumayushi was Gumayushi and like this guy's their understudy. But no, he is that good. Like this guy is nuts.
Yeah, and the other thing, I'm glad that you point out what a beast he is in late game team fights, Berserker specifically, because I think that's where it's easy for me to point to him being better than Hansama. It's not even that Hansama is a bad late game team fighter, but from what we've seen this year, and this is what our tier list is based off, is this split, is like he's had a couple of hiccups in the last few weeks where he's getting caught late. The one against EG, I think they still end up winning that game, but I'm like, dude, you can't just waste your arcane shift and just chill on Ezreal. Like you're gonna get punished if you do that. And sure enough, he did. And so there's these moments where you're getting picked off in team fights where it's like that is your job, is to not do that as an AD carry, and you can't be careless. Do I love seeing the aggressive play? Sure. But we're seeing the aggressive play out of Berserker without those mistakes, and we're seeing Hansama do a couple of mistakes. And so for me, that's where it kind of comes down to. Like winning lane is great and all, but what matters the most as an AD carry is what you're going to do in those late game team fights. And that's why I put Berserker ahead of him.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't look at any of the other tier lists that people were doing outside of the LCS analyst. The only one I saw was a Doublelift one. Doublelift did have Berserker ahead of Hansama. Um, Basically, he was kind of in the same sentiment, just like he sort of recognized like how damn good this guy is. Like he even said it himself, like it's nothing against Hansama. He just thinks Berserker is that good, and I'm right there with him.
The only problem with the Doublelift one is that he plays against all these guys in solo queue and champions queue, and that's where it's like our tier list is based off of the games that we see in spring split, right? Whereas he does have a lot more information. So like that's cool and all. However, we're talking about how they perform in the LCS. So that's where it's a little bit different when it comes to double lifts, because he ended up putting Sneaky in form. He put Sven on there, which is totally fine. Because I think the point that he's making there, and which I would kind of agree with, is that I don't think our AD carries are all that great right now, to be quite honest. Even FBI, I think, is performing a little bit worse than he normally. Well, not even a little bit, much worse
That's one
than
of
he
the
normally is.
reasons why I
And like
thought that
after
those other
that,
lists were so garbage. Like they had FBI as 3. Like that is so shit, man. Like that is so like you are not paying attention to what you're actually watching. Like you
yeah, he has
cannot
not
you
had that great of a
cannot
split.
watch this whole split and tell me that FBI is better than Danny. Like I think Luger is also better than FBI this split at least, but like you cannot tell me that FBI has had a better split than Danny. Like that is such horseshit. Like you guys are like, come on, like that. This is one of the situations where I'm like disappointed. Like these are our analysts because like if you're watching the games, this is not the case.
Well, and I've heard, I think it was Emily Rand talk about this. This was Oh, you know what it was? It was her and Kelsey Moser were watching the LPL, and I was watching their stream as they're like talking about the LPL, and they were both saying how they don't like doing tier lists because when you do that, like there's so many people that just want to flame your tier list, and so that's why they don't like it. And so when I look at that and I see FBI ahead of Danny, I'm wondering if people are just like they're holding way too much of FBI's past performance, that like they just don't want to get flamed for putting FBI below Danny, for all the FBI fans to be like, what is this? And so like maybe they're more held back in their quote unquote hot takes, if you will. But regardless, from what we've seen this split, I think you're right. Like I can't put FBI behind Danny. I thought Danny's had actually a really good split. And the other thing too is like we saw Danny look really good last year, and we kind of hoped that he would continue that this year. Danny being third on this tier list is a big success for the LCS in general, if you ask me. Just to have a native young talent performing really well. Like I think that's great that he's number 3. This is like a big win, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since it could have been Doublelift, and I don't think Doublelift would have been top 3, honestly. I know a lot of people hate hearing that, but Doublelift was not looking that good towards the end of his career. And I think what you're getting out of Danny, it was obviously cheaper and a much better play for your team. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
The
I
last thing,
no,
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead because I cut you off earlier.
The last thing that I'll say is that I don't think Luger's better than FBI, even if FBI is not playing that well. I think you're being still a little bit generous to Luger. I myself am also a fan of Luger, and I want to see him do well. But I think people are a little bit too forgiving just because of how bad his teammates have been. That like, he'll just look way better than the rest of them. But overall, I don't think Luger's looked that great. I think he's looked good for a young rookie, and so 6 is where I put him. And I think people kind of sleep on Neo a little bit because of some of the nice outplays that he has.
Yeah, I think Neo's good. Like, dude, I'm not gonna lie. I even considered putting Neo 5 in FBI 6. Like, I had that, and I was like, like, do I really think that Neo is like been better than FBI? Like, I don't know. I ended up putting FBI 5, but like, for a hot minute, I had FBI 6 there.
Yeah. I mean, we can say it all day long. We know FBI isn't playing that well in comparison to what we're used to, but him and who he have been pretty vocal in their interviews with Travis Gafford that they think they're starting to look better. And I mean, maybe the 5-game win streak is in part due to them not being such a liability like they had been. Um, but anyways, we'll have to wait and see. Anything else on the tier list, or are we good?
Well, I'll quickly pull a bit of a double lift here.
Okay.
Um, you know, Sven is not on an
Oh yeah.
LCS team. He's not on an academy team even because he's got this weird situation going on with Cloud9 where he, practices with them but just doesn't play the academy matches because they can't field him for the import slot. If you were to put Sven on this list, where would you put him?
Uh, it's hard to say because we haven't seen him play recently, and this list is supposed to be about spring split. I guess probably somewhere around 4. I don't know, 4 or 5.
I think so as well. I think Doublelift said he put him at 5. He would have like Berserker, Hansama, FBI, and Danny above him.
he had some troll ass shit. Like he had
Yeah,
like
he did.
4B, 4C.
Oh, he
Like,
did, but
yeah,
I was surprised that he had Wild Turtle so far up there. And Tactical
yeah.
as well. Like, dude, Tactical, like, he has high highs, but like he has some low lows. Like,
I've been pretty honest that I don't think Tactical is that good, and I don't want to just forget all the pop-off team fights that he's had in the past. I think there was that Callista one I think it was in playoffs for Team Liquid.
yeah.
Anyways, like he has some nice pop-off team fights. Don't get me wrong, but he also ints a lot, and so I just I don't want people to think I'm some Tactical hater. I just don't think he's really that good, to be honest. But he did get Player of the Week, even though I disagreed with it. I was like, I didn't think he played
Yeah,
that well,
I agree.
but but you know what though? Whatever. Good for him because he has not been good, and God, did he need something like that? So whatever.
Yeah, and I'll
They
go.
had to give it to someone on TSM, right?
Yeah, I'll go to bat for one more player because I think Lost for the most part is just like a little underrated. I thought he was actually pretty decent on TSM with Sword Art when TSM was kind of ramping up towards the end, and him and Sword Art were actually starting to play much better. Do I think that he's been that great for Golden Guardians? No, not really. But I also think that their bot lane, like Ole, hasn't been that special either. But I mean, I still think Lost is like he's decent. Like, yeah, I mean, you see it right there. I have him 7. Like, I would take him over Tactical Johnson and whatever IMT bot laner you want. Like, I think he's a solid player. I just don't think
Yeah,
he
I'm
has the
surprised.
best bot lane partner right now.
I'm surprised he had Johnson 9. I had him 7, but I'm surprised he had him
I
9 just because I thought he actually had a really good start to the split as well. And I guess maybe the performance against Team Liquid helped me be more easy about putting him number 7, just because I think he was the reason they won that game, even though he STL through it.
yeah,
I thought Johnson has been okay.
I originally had Johnson 9 and Johnson 8 and Tactical 9, but I swapped them
Mm.
back because I kind of like thought about it for a little bit, and I didn't really go back and look at any games per se, but I just like looked back at like the match summary just to kind of like help jog my memory about like what Johnson's been doing this season, and just like off the top of my mind, like he's just been super invisible.
Mm.
And I feel like that's a bad thing when you're an AD carry. Like I don't think he hasn't even had like that many pop off games. Like apart from this one against Team Liquid, like he hasn't had like a single like pop off game.
Yeah, he did. He had a Jin game. I don't remember who it was against, but this was earlier in the split. He had a really nice pop off Jin
I don't know.
game.
I just from my recollection, like he felt very invisible to me. And while Tactical does have like those end moments, like he does have those games where he plays really insane. Like the reason that they win the game is because of him. And I don't really think that's the case with Johnson
Okay. Let's get
for
into
the
the
most part.
game predictions. Let's get into we got Super Week coming up, and the co-streams will be back. Big Pog.
Yeah, co-streams are
Co-
back. Honestly, it will still puzzle me why they got rid of the co-streams, and
It doesn't puzzle me, man. You don't. I mean, don't get me wrong. I want them, but we know why. Come on, don't we?
I mean we do like it's still at the same time, like with the hit to the viewership that the LCS is taking, like they should be desperate at this point to get those viewers back.
Yeah. The thing is, it's hard to know. So I definitely agree that it is in big part, like the viewership drop off is in big part to not having co-streams. However, even year over year, we saw League fall off in viewership regardless when there was no co-streams. Like, remember, I mean, obviously you remember when like CLG versus TSM would get 500K people in like season 4 and 5 and stuff like that, right? Like, it's been a slow decline anyways. I think this kind of kicked it into an extra gear. But I think you would see decline regardless. But anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, first up, Super Week. We'll go through it quick. TL versus Golden Guardians. Team
Liquid.
Next up, FlyQuest versus EG. Important match for both FlyQuest and EG. Most likely these teams are making playoffs, but playoff seeding also very important. I'm going to take EG. They're looking
Me
good.
too.
FlyQuest not so much.
Right.
Even
EG.
though this is your match you like because it's like good versus evil.
Yeah, I love the good versus evil. No one else cares about it but me.
Next up, Cloud9 versus Dignitas. Cloud9, obviously. I was thinking about this just when I was briefly looking at the schedule previously. I can't even think of the last time that Dig actually beat Cloud9 in an LCS match. It has to be like 2 years ago, at least.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Like, they get shit stomped every time they play against C9.
Okay, I mean, I would expect that, I guess. But anyways, Cloud9 for me. Then there's Immortals and CLG. I think we're both going CLG.
The LG, dude.
Wow.
Next up, 100 Thieves versus TSM. If TSM wants to make that miracle run, they got to kick it off with the big win against 100 Thieves. Are they going to do it? No, fuck no. 100 Thieves, please.
They could though. They're playing a little bit better, but no, I'm not counting on it. I'm still going 100 Thieves.
First game Saturday, Team Liquid versus Dignitas. I'm sorry, Dignitas, you're getting it up the bum this week. Team Liquid.
Yeah, Team Liquid.
Next up, Golden Guardians versus EG. Very important match once again for playoff seeding. I will take
This is
EG.
the toughest one. This is the toughest one for me, but I'm also going to go EG. I think this is probably the closest game of the weekend, or maybe
Could be our next
no.
match.
I think it's probably this one.
Cloud9 versus 100 Thieves. I'm gonna still roll with Cloud9.
Me too. Even though 100 Thieves is looking better, I don't think they're looking that much better. And even though Cloud9 is looking worse, I don't think they're looking that much worse. I fully expect Cloud9 to pretty much gap them everywhere, minus even in the jungle maybe, but less so in the jungle. Cloud9.
Next up, the El Clasico of the LCS, CLG versus TSM. I'm rolling with CLG again.
Yeah, I said a couple weeks ago that when this match came around, I would take TSM, and I was a little bit afraid that I wouldn't, but I am going to, just because they picked up 2 wins this past weekend. They are definitely looking better, and I think it's close, but I do think TSM is slightly the better team. I'm gonna be looking forward to this one, but TSM.
Last up, Saturday, IMT versus FlyQuest.
If FlyQuest loses this, I'm gonna lose it myself.
So you're picking FlyQuest then?
Yes.
I think I just have to go with FlyQuest because IMT is just that bad.
Man, I would have been surprised if you took Immortals. Next up is first game on Sunday, 100 Thieves versus Dignitas. 100 Thieves.
Yeah, I feel bad for you, Dignitas. Bye,
Yeah.
Fake God.
I mean, if this is the one that they have the best chance of taking a game this weekend, probably against 100 Thieves. So I could see them taking a game here, but I'm not counting on it. So 100 Thieves, and then it's EG versus CLG. Are we both going EG here?
And my world is a 2-0 versus a 2-0. Which one's gonna get the 3-0? I'll still go with EG.
Okay. FlyQuest versus
Ban
Cloud9.
Zeri time this, please. Ban Zeri.
FlyQuest versus Cloud9. I am gonna go Cloud9.
Cloud9 all day.
Golden Guardians versus Immortals. Definitely Golden Guardians. This is another one where I'll be upset if anyone loses to Immortals. I will not be happy.
Yeah, I'll go Golden Guardians as well. Last game of the LCS TSM regular season, I should say. TSM versus Team Liquid.
Team Liquid.
Yeah, the script, it's not meant to be TL.
Okay, so we cruise through those pretty quickly. What do we got left? Just some quick news?
Yeah,
Not even a lot of it, right?
some very minor quick news, man. There's nothing going on. There's all this like coach drama stuff going on. Oh, speaking of drama, I just said it. This was an unintentional transition. Champions Queue, there was a bit of discussion about this at the beginning of last week. Basically, like, I think it happened like Monday night or Tuesday morning, basically, where a couple people took to Twitter to kind of talk about how there's not a lot of LCS players that are really actively playing Champions Queue, LCS and Academy. There was one tweet by Lorlo where he basically said that only 16 of the 100 total LCS and Academy players were active on Champions Queue at that time. That's kind of a shit tweet because it was like a one snapshot of a night, like taken kind of out of context. Like, oh wow, only these players are on. So I didn't really like get behind that a whole lot. And then Ole kind of came out with this tweet talking about how Champions Queue, like, there's some big flaws to it, especially with the LP system and just how like you win it by playing the most games possible. And I hope sort of going into the future that they find a way to sort of revamp the system and potentially create some sort of MMR-based matchmaking in terms of making the teams fair. Because one thing that not only, you know, Ole talked about, but many other players in Champions Queue have talked about is like whatever team is better just usually wins for the most part. Like I'll be watching Double stream and like he'll get Core JJ and Summon on his team and it's like, yep, GG insta one. And you know, they're on the enemy team, like he'll literally just say it out loud, it's like, yeah, this game's probably lost.
Yeah, that kind of sucks, I guess, but also I don't know, like that's going to happen. That happens in solo queue as well sometimes. So to me it's like I don't know, that's not much different from solo queue. Like yes, there is a better MMR system in solo queue, but we've seen it many times where one side just gets stacked, right? So it's not all that different. If they could find something to make that better, of course, everyone would want that. As far as the LP thing goes, I just don't know why it needs to be so heavily weighted. Like I do like it incentivizing people to play games, but 10 to 5? Like why can't an LP win be 8 and a loss be 7 or something like Does it have to be so drastic? I don't know. That's the only question that I have. I think it's good that it rewards people for playing more. And the last thing I'll say is, even I'm not very heavily invested in knowing how often these players are playing. So when it comes to the are you on Peter Dunn's side or Olay and Lorlo's side, that I don't know. If, however, it is common that there's only 16 out of the 100 players playing, and I even think I saw Peter Dunn say something about 40. Am I making that up?
Yeah, he said Peter Dunn in his response basically said that on any given night, there's on average about 40 of those 100 players playing at some point.
Yes, to me, that's not a good number to brag about. When I saw that, I was like, oh, that's a good number? Like,
The
what
other
else are
point
these
that he
players
made
doing?
specifically with that is like that's not the same 40 players every time. That's just 40 players on any given night.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
who knows that number? Probably in terms of like players who play throughout the week, that could be maybe somewhere in the ballpark of like 60 to 70. But on any given night, it's anywhere between it's around 40.
Yeah, and this is where I don't have a hard opinion on this kind of stuff because I don't know enough about it. But to me, when I heard 40, I was like, that's not that much. And I do think that Ole is right in saying like players do need to play more. But again, I don't really have a strong opinion on that.
Yeah, I just think that like this is the first iteration of Champions Queue, and there's a lot of kinks to be worked out with the system, whether that's the LP gains, the queue times, because like the queue times is a really big issue for players, and at that point, like some of them just decided to play a different role because they just wanted to get in game. Like I don't remember exactly, but like Blabber, like there was like people was like Blabber was playing mid lane, RJS was like playing like jungle and support, was just like hella role swapping to get into games.
Which
Um,
again is not ideal, but also does happen in solo queue as well. Which I mean, let's say like if everything's going to be just like solo queue, that's not a good thing to defend champion queue. So like they shouldn't have to play these off roles that often, but it's something that would happen anyways.
yeah, I just think that the system will improve in time or like over time because
I
like
think and hope so as well. I
mhm.
think so as well. The last thing I'll say on it was that I think Peter Dunn also made the point that like some teams are in the middle of playing ground, so like TSM Academy, I think he was saying.
Proving
Maybe it was
grounds,
someone.
yeah,
What did I say?
playing grounds.
Oh, anyway, and they're busy playing somewhere else. Like, is probably what I was trying to say. So like, I guess what he's saying is like, not all 100 players are available to play at that time. So that's something else. Just to give his side of the argument a little bit more. But in the end, I don't really care who wins the argument. I don't even know if it was really a big argument in the first place. But what I do care about is Champions Queue being improved on, and that's what I think will happen in the long run. So.
Yep. Last up, I wanted to get back on the T1 hype train because they finished 18-0, and it just got announced just like earlier this evening that Keria was the LCK MVP. I just want to let you guys know if you haven't been watching the LCK, T1 is cracked. If I had to give my 2 cents on it, I would say that Keria is probably the best player in the world right now. I
And I've
know.
heard, I've heard other people say that as
I
well.
know that that is a position that's usually given over to mid laners, and it's kind of now sort of skewed towards junglers because Canyon has kind of been like dominating that role and kind of the title of best player in the world. Him and Showmaker basically for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But dude, Keria is like just disgusting. Like this guy is so good. I've been
I
trying to watch every single T1 game basically since like towards the start of the split. He is just that good. Like their team is insane. I think they're most likely going to win the LCK in a world where they don't win it. Be probably pretty crazy. Like T1's got to all
yeah.
get COVID and die or something. I don't know at this point. Like they should be favorites going into MSI. They're probably going to win MSI. Like be fearful of T1 at MSI. That's all I'm saying.
I think it would be pretty disappointing if we didn't see them at MSI because of all this hype. I haven't watched much LCK as you're well aware of. Um, but yeah, that I think that would suck if
Alma Life
this
finished
team that goes
last,
18-0 doesn't make it. Oh, did they? What was their record?
like 3-15, I think. I think
How did
Nongshim.
Nongshim?
I think they were like 4-14.
No.
Let me like take a look here. Yeah, Nongshim. Oh, they were 5-13.
Just
Alma
tell me
Life.
BDD is still a monster. Tell me J&T. Just give me some
I don't even know.
copium.
I thought he was like out with COVID for a long time. Like
Well, he
Nongshim
was for
got.
a little bit. I don't know how long he was out for though,
Yeah.
but yeah.
That's another problem. It's like, dude, they're kind of having a COVID problem right now, and MSI is supposed to be held in Korea. Who knows? We might get Iceland Part 3. I kind of said that as a joke in our Discord earlier because like I think you
Yeah.
posted a screenshot of like the daily COVID cases in South Korea, and it's
Yeah.
not looking good.
There's a big spike in South Korea, and when I saw that, I was like, this is something we should probably talk about because MSI is supposed to be there. Like, what is this going
Yeah.
to look like? And I don't know. But yeah, you make a good point. We might see Iceland Part 3. If we do, that's fine. Do I want that to happen? Of course not. But MSI and Worlds has been successful when they go to these locations or whatever you want to call them. They've done a good
Reykjavik.
job over there. So yeah, they've done a good job there. So won't be the end of the world. Okay, that's it for this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in every week. We love you very much. And remember to hit the subscribe button. We will see you guys next week. This has been episode 78 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.